Talanoa is a word that is derived from the Samoan culture, which means having a conversation. This word can also be broken into two. Tala means story, and Noa means to tie, which brings us to Talanoa. Utopia Washington has created Talanoa as a platform to provide safe spaces for our queer and trans-Pacific Islanders to have a conversation, share their stories, and for community members to make a connection. While Talanoa is usually hosted in person, due to the pandemic, Utopia Washington has been able to utilize digital platforms to bring you Talanoa virtually. We are glad to have you here with us today. Welcome to our Talanoa.
Talo Falava, everyone. Malo Lele. Happy Transgender Awareness Week. First off, we would like to open up our program with a land acknowledgement. And I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. It is important to note that this kind of acknowledgement is not a new practice developed by colonial institutions. Land acknowledgement is a traditional custom dating back centuries for many Native communities and nations. For non-Indigenous communities, land acknowledgement is a powerful way to show respect and honoring the Indigenous peoples of the land on which we work and live. Acknowledgement is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. And with that, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tudi Fatuasi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a program coordinator for our Sex Worker Empowerment Initiative program here at Utopia, Washington. And also I have with me our co-facilitator for this evening, Ms. Amasai.
Bulavinaka, everyone. My name is Miss Amasai Cheke. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm also with Utopia Washington, and I serve as Utopia's regional community organizer. And it's so good to be here, and happy Trans Awareness Week, everyone.
Thank you, Amasai. And tonight we have a Talanoa, which is a special Talanoa, which is called Intergenerational Violence and Trauma, where we envision a world of possibilities and really imagining what this world would be like for our community members when violence and harm ceases to exist. And with that, I'd like to kick us off directly by introducing our special panel members this evening. First up, we have Bonti Palaita, who is a proud Samoan Fa'afafine or trans woman. She is currently a senior in high school at Enumclaw High School. Bonti also currently serves as Utopia Washington's Youth Council president. Bonti expressed that her mission to succeed as a leader in her community is developing different ways to create and promote safe spaces and breaking policies for our two-spirit LGBTQIA+ youth in communities and schools. And so aside from all of the seriousness, Bonti also takes self-care very seriously by playing volleyball and doing makeup. Please put your hands together and welcome Bonti Palaita. Hi, Bonti. How are you this evening?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So happy you could join us. Please feel free to share any additional details that you would like folks to know about yourself, like your name, organization, or pronouns, but also the land that you are currently occupying. Where are you joining us from?
Well, hello everybody. My name is Bonti Palaita. I'm currently your reigning Utopia Youth Council president. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a senior at Enumclaw High School. Thank you for having me. Happy Trans Awareness Week.
Thank you. And our second panelist is none other than Ruma. Ruma is a co-founder of Intransitive, which was originated back in 2017. The beginning of Intransitive's work revolved around organizing and providing trans with competency training to organizations, businesses, and community members across Arkansas, Texas, Iowa, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Puerto Rico. Since then, their work has expanded to provide advocacy for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, support in securing emergency housing and groceries, HIV and harm reduction violence, and supporting in securing and also harm reduction support on legal advocacy and interpretation and translation. Welcome, Rumba.
Hi, Roomba. How are you?
Hello, I'm
Yeah,
well. Thank you for having me.
so nice to have you here with us today, Rumba. Maybe you can tell us more about you and which land that you're occupying on currently.
So I'm usually in Arkansas, which is Osage and Cato land, but I'm been at a conference in what is called now North Carolina, which is I mispronounce it, Chero, Manu, and Shugari land. Um, I'm the founding director of Intransitive. It's a trans migrant organization in Arkansas. You heard a little bit about it. Um, and yeah, we do. We try to combine the direct service with the organizing and some legislative work. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being here, considering the difference in time zones. So, yeah, I'd like to introduce our next panel member, Crystal Tua. Crystal is a junior at Auburn High School. She is a proud trans woman and Fa'afafine. Crystal recently joined Utopia Washington as a student council organizer. Through this role, Crystal has an opportunity to work towards policy change and community outreach to help expand the knowledge of the QT BIPOC communities within schools, the school districts, our communities, as well as board meetings. And so Crystal is excited about her role as this provides her with an opportunity to give back to her community. Welcome, Crystal. How are you this evening?
I'm good.
So happy you could join us. Please feel free to add on any additional details that you would like folks to know about yourself.
So my name's Crystal Tua. My pronouns are she, her, and getting into this type of work was just such an interest for me. Starting my sophomore year, I was still like questioning my gender identity throughout middle school too. But when I found policy change type of work, that was really what drove me to this group, like organizing the youth group and being a school representative for this youth group. So that really just really opened the opportunity for me. So that's why I'm grateful to be here and happy to be here for Trans Awareness Week. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. And our last panelist for tonight, Ricky Nathanson. Ricky is a senior advisor of the Global Trans Program based in the Washington, D.C. area. In her role, she serves as an expert on outrights work, supporting efforts on legal gender recognition and strengthening the trans and intersex movement globally. Ricky brings a wealth of experience in global trans advocacy, combined with a long track record in the business management and nonprofit sector. She's famously known for having stood her ground and instituting and winning the civil suit against the government and police for her native country after her unlawful arrest and detention in 2014. Enrique, welcome. Thank you for gracing us with your fierce energy. And like everybody else, if we missed out on anything, with apart from the amazing work that you do for the trans movement here nationally and also globally, and we know that you're in Washington D.C. Maybe you can explain more of your work. I think you have your mic muted.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. As you said, I am in Washington, D.C., so I'm 3 hours actually ahead of you. It's like well after 9 o'clock in the evening. So it's been a long day. It's like 12 hours in front of the computer. So excuse me if I nod off a little later on. So I think you have basically introduced me the most of what I am. I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but I'm a native of Zimbabwe, which is in southern Africa. So that's where I come from, and that's the country that I fought against and I won. And needless to say that the case that I won was not only for me, but it was for trans people globally, and it has set a precedent for all of us on this call today, for us to receive the respect and the dignity that we need and that we require as individuals. And it's so fitting for us to be speaking about it this week in Trans Awareness Week. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess festive season is just around the corner. And are you excited?
I am excited, which
Mhm.
brings me to like our check-in question for the evening. But really, I just wanted to ask everyone to do a temperature check on like what are you looking forward to this holiday season? Do you even celebrate any of the holidays coming up? And like, what's your favorite part about it, or what isn't your favorite part about it? Amasai, would you like to model?
Yes, I think for me, my favorite holiday season is Christmas. Because I think every year I got to celebrate 25 years of my life. Celebrating Christmas in Fiji is different. But then when I moved to America, learning that it's a whole lot of different experience. And I think half of the day celebrating on Christmas Day was um, with my chosen family. Then the other half of the day was with my family, who I went to church later on. But I think Christmas has always been the holiday for me. And New Year's, not so much. It's always noisy. So I think Christmas has always had the soft place in my heart. And I think that's one thing that I love celebrating and something that I look forward to celebrating. And what about you?
Let's see. For me, I really just enjoy being together with my loved ones, specifically around New Year's Eve because it's a great time to recreate yourself. Looking forward to the new year and the imaginations around like what your goals could be, things that you wish for yourself and for your loved ones. I think that's the best part. And I can pass it to Roomba.
Okay. Yeah, definitely Christmas.
Excuse me.
I like to call it Christmas. And similar to Amasai, like grew up in El Salvador, and it was very different than how it is here. But I felt like that always like helped lift our spirits. The decorating, right? Going to thrift stores and trying to find stuff, and then like trying to make the lights and like colors and stuff. I felt like really lifted our spirit. So it's just stayed kind of like as a tradition of like gift mass is coming, right? And like we get to give stuff to folks to make them smiled or whatnot. So yeah, I would say Christmas for me. Are you passing it? Should I pass it?
Yes, please pass on.
I'll pass it to Crystal.
Okay. So for me, the holiday season, I think I would have to go with Thanksgiving. The only reason why is because um growing up, like we always had food. We always came together with family, and we always had like that moment to be together, to pray together, to just be in the moment together. And Christmas was like Christmas. They don't talk about Christmas, but yeah, Thanksgiving was always fun, and then also Black Friday too. Get them deals.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Who would you like to pass it to?
Bounty. Yeah.
That's a hard one because I like all the holidays, but I think I would probably pick New Year's. There's nothing like more better than counting on the new year with your family and watching all the fireworks and spending quality time and setting goals for yourself for the new year. But yeah.
Thank you, Fonty. Who would you like to pass it to?
Ricky.
Um, I like Actually, I like the whole holiday season, starting from next week, from Thanksgiving right through to New Year. Um, Although I must say, as you've all said, it's Christmas is really different here in the United States. We're in the global north, and I come from the global south, so it's like it's summertime, Christmas time, so it's completely a whole different vibe. Um, but I love Christmas. I love the 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 receiving gifts and the exchanging gifts and the food and just being with the loved ones. So yeah, I mean, I actually I love this season. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Um, with that, I guess we can begin our panel discussion around our topic. Once again, our topic for Talanoa this evening is to really examine harm and violence that's been done either onto us or through the social justice movement within our work, and what really examining what we can do to overcome some of the challenges that we've been faced with um, upon our community. But really, we wanted to create a space where we can sort of dig deep on what intergenerational harm and violence looks like, because oftentimes it's passed down through our our family members or through others onto us, and we sort of start to experience these same harms and pass it on to the next generation. And with that, I'd like to open up our conversation by really asking um, folks, like, what does harm and trauma mean to you, and how do you define violence and abuse? And I would like to maybe start off by inviting Roomba to maybe answer this, and we can probably go around the room, the virtual room, to see what other folks' stance on that.
Um, let's see. I think violence is when a person or persons intentionally act or do an act with the purpose of causing significant damage, as to stop or decrease your livelihood. And I think that it can come from individuals as like individuals, or it could come from individuals within a system, and then utilizing that power that they have to like farther cause the damage, right? um, as far as abuse, I think it's more of the like an intentional cruel treatment towards another person. um, and then trauma is what happens when you go through a traumatic event and you don't have that support system to like help you bounce back. um, so you kind of get stuck in that like trauma piece, right? But yeah, that's kind of how I define them.
Thank you, Roomba. How do you define violence and trauma, Bonti, and what does that mean to you in your definition?
Especially as a young person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. I think coming from a youth's perspective, I feel like, violence and trauma comes in very different forms, whether it's, physically, mentally, you know, um, verbally. I would probably define violence as an abuse as like, I don't know, like an unfortunate experience. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, all of this is an experience, and it's not the very most fortunate experience, but you know, that's how I would explain it from a youth perspective. Us being so young and not having like a lot, like a voice. Us being young, so it's good to hop on things like this and um talk. I don't really know how to explain it, but yeah.
Thank you. Ricky, would you like to add anything?
I think it's been said, but it's been said by both by Rumba and by Bonti. But it's very what I want to bring to the table is that not many people are are aware of systemic violence, and that could be anything from lack of policies that protect you. So by by virtue of the fact that we don't have policies that protect and nurture trans bodies is a form of violence in itself, because we are not given the opportunity to live to our fullest. Um, and you'll find that even when you look at at familial violence, like violence from families and communities, it's perpetrated by a bigger system, which allows that to happen. And that's a discussion I think we don't often have, and it's something we need to always be very aware of. Um, the fact that young trans people now in the United States are facing such a big pushback on trans rights in itself is a major form of violence against an entire community. So I think we just need to be very aware that we tend to think of violence as being something physical, where somebody harms us, somebody stabs us, somebody beats us up, somebody is verbally abusive to us, or sexually violates us in one way or the other. But the fact that we have systems that do not protect us in itself, I think, is one of the biggest forms and the greatest forms of violence that we face as trans people.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's really important to note. Like, oftentimes, just to reiterate what you had mentioned, violence and harm is most commonly uh, how should I say it, observed, if not that, physically, but taking a look at it from a perspective through political areas as well. So I'd like to really turn this opportunity to Crystal, considering that you're now a council member on our council organizer on our youth panel for Utopia. What can you speak to, like, your experience and how you define violence and harm, but also please feel free to share a little bit about like your advocacy work through the youth panel. Well, I think Crystal blacked out.
I think this is one of the forms of systemic, you know, violence and abuse that we have to face with technology and internet. And I think, Rumba, you shared such critical points on, violence really does come in different forms, and to be one of the scariest forms when it's a significant thing to damage, people, especially a human being, whether, and then Bondi, you talked about whether it be physical or verbal or emotional. And that's the beauty about, Ricky, your line of work, really about, that we should be aware of systemic violence that do exist. And we've seen it over the years, and even just a few months ago, how really the system has become really brutal, especially for trans health. And some of us who are currently transitioning, how does that look like for those of us who have began this journey now? And how does that look like? And I think Crystal is probably facing some internet issue, but that's okay. And going into to deepen the conversation around, I think we all talked about the types of violence and trauma that feels that we what that means to us is that, and I think not too often we don't always have the uncomfortable conversation, but I think most of us need to have the uncomfortable conversation because it's the very uncomfortable thing that is threatening our lives. And I think, what are the type of violence and trauma do we experience as trans people? And I know our narratives are not the same, and most of the time we don't always talk about it because we can't, because it's too heavy. It's too it it kind of triggers um, things that have passed.
Right.
But I think we should always have that conversation, especially at Trans Awareness Week, especially at every spaces. So, what does trauma and violence look like in your experience?
You want to open that up
Yeah,
to?
to maybe Monty, as a young Fafafine who is navigating this world, what what's your experiences in terms of violence and trauma as a young Fafafine?
Well, it's pretty rough for me where I go to school at and where I live. Doing my advocacy work is pretty rough for me, but I still fight through it. I think some of the trauma is like being a colored trans girl in a predominantly white school. So I think like my trauma is just like like I've dealt with a lot, being cyberbullied and being like verbally abused and like the hallway, like, I feel like school should be a place where everybody should be their authentic self. And at my school, like opportunities are very limited for people like me. And I think that's part of like my experiences is just, I'm still continuing to fight for trans and our LGBTQ because it's not very known over here and, people are not very educated about it. Um, it was traumatizing for me, like, but I don't want to get emotional, but yeah, it was a lot for me, but I also overcame a lot and, continue to push within my advocacy work for our youth. And that's pretty much it.
Mhm. Thank you for bringing that up. I can't imagine really what it must be like in this time and age while you're a colored person and also trans to be in school at this time, because those experiences is starkly different from what I or anyone else has experienced. But like through your advocacy work, do you feel like there's enough protections in place at school for you to really overcome some of those challenges? And like, do you feel that there's any justification in like an issue that you might be experiencing, to feel comfortable enough to speak up about that?
I mean, not really. I mean, a lot of like in the school programs that I'm in, I'm not very like included. And it comes to a point to where I have to like, like in a rep to, get my point across and to really fight like for what's right. And learning from my experiences, it wasn't well, so I wouldn't want any other youth in the future to, experience not even half of what I've gone through, like, but it's something that's still being worked on, but I am faithfully working on it. And there's only like a couple places that I can say is just like the cultural program that I'm in. That's with all the kids that are not white at my school. But yeah, there's not a lot of like open opportunity and stuff for me to, really say a lot, but I still sticking in there.
A way to persevere, a way to be resilient. I know that you at times you might feel like you're going through it alone, but please trust and know that you have a wide network of people here, not just here, but through the screen, where whoever is tuning in, that that support, that level of support is always accessible to you if you need it.
Of
So thank you
course.
for that.
Thank you.
Roomba, how have you experienced violence and harm, either like through your professional career or even through your lived experience?
Um, well, I lived undocumented here for over 17 years. So there was a lot of violence because of that, right? A lot of like running and hiding and constantly having to move to avoid immigration, um, which it's just a lot of trauma that a lot of migrants have to face, right? Um, but one of the things that comes to mind is just like Arkansas is very red, right? Like extremely red. And so we've had white supremacists show up to our events. Um, we had a Trans Day of Visibility event that was just like a celebration piece, and they showed up with arms and like started punching folks, and the police just watching and not doing anything. We've had cops like following us around during legislative session, like heavily like guarding the hearings, right, that we were at. Um, so there's a lot of that, and then personally, um, being criminalized um, here in Arkansas by just folks that had power, right? And so when you enter the criminal justice system as an undocumented person, then it's just even harder to navigate, right? And so at that time, not having the support and not having the financial means also to like be able to defend myself, I was like formally criminalized, right? Like a sentencing, um, and that process was just extremely traumatic, I would say. Being arrested, being trans, and then having folks treat you like you're an animal, right? Like they don't know like where do we put you. Having folk have Whenever you get arrested and they do like the search, right? Like you're supposed to completely take your clothes off in front of someone, and then they start making comments about your body, and like you look like one thing from the neck up and you look like another thing from the neck down. And so just like everything that went with that, like the constant like misgendering, the constantly like dead naming, um and it wasn't just the system itself, right? It was also the community where I lived, which was predominantly white, and so a lot of folks were contributing to that. So even after like going through like the sentencing, I still had folks coming and like posting flyers that had a picture of me before I started testosterone and a picture of me after I started testosterone, my dead name, my date of birth, um, my address, my employer. Like all of this info was posted around several areas of town and like online. And it just forced me to have to leave that area, right? So whenever I like migrated, I came to that area of Arkansas and just kind of like forcefully made it my home. And then it felt like being pushed out of home again because I couldn't go out of my house and like um I couldn't go out of my house and like feel safe, right? The folks would identify me and would do something. So yeah, that's the experience in Arkansas for me.
Well, I, it's a lot, you know, for those of us who embody our identities as trans identities, and knowing that even as a country as America, who still criminalize um, identities that don't conform to the binary. And Mama Riki, your story has been in highlight, within the trans movement globally. And 2014 was one of the years that I don't think so any trans would ever want to ever feel that way. But you're such a fierce woman, I have to say. You have come a long way, and you're still here. You're still being at the forefront, doing this work. And how has it been your experience in this journey?
Yes, I think pretty much like Rumba said earlier on. I mean, once you are once you find yourself at the wrong side of of the police or any sort of armed forces, as a trans person or as a person who's seen to to have a body and an identity that is different to the norm, then you face a lot of problems. Pretty much like Rumba, I was arrested at gunpoint by 6 riot police officers in a local hotel. I was sitting with my friends drinking after work, just minding my own business, and these people arrived, and I was arrested. Um, I was taken to the police station. I was made, when I got there, to take off my shoes and sit on the floor like a real criminal. While I was waiting for all the paperwork, and it was crazy because it was after 5, so the police station was busy, and I had like one police person talking to me here and another one pulling me the other way, and they were asking questions like, "Oh no, so who, what are you?" Very much like Roomba, are you a man? Are you a woman? Why do you have long hair? Why are you dressing these clothes? And then I was pulled aside to another office, and there were 5 male police officers, and very, very rough and very rude. And they said, "Well, how do we know what you are? Let's see. Take your clothes off." And then they stripped me naked, in front of 5 of them at gunpoint. And it was horrific. Not only was it humiliating, you're standing, and these men, and they're jeering and they're laughing, and they're touching my body with their guns. Like, you're not sure, are they going to shoot me, or are they just being um, ridiculous, really? And then laughing and jeering and calling me all these sorts of names, and the one had like the gun up to my face and say, you're nothing but a waste of a human being, that sort of thing. And then to have to go to spend 2 nights and 3 days, well, 2 nights in a dark prison cell with no light whatsoever. I was given a dirty blanket that covered me, it had lice on it. I couldn't even use it, and it was cold. So I could have frozen to death, literally. Um, but then and then after I went to court and I was acquitted, and then I filed the civil suit against the government of Zimbabwe. It took 2 years for the case to come before the court. And we went to court, and that court case itself was harrowing. It was meant to be a one morning thing, like 2 hours. It dragged on for 3 days because the state was trying so hard to discredit me. But in between the 2014 and 2017, the media onslaught was it was it was terrible. I had my own business. I had a modeling agency, and I had a consultancy firm. I was doing really well for myself. But with the bad publicity I got in the local media and in the media in the country of Zimbabwe, I had to shut my business down because I couldn't even walk from my home to the corner to buy a newspaper, and people would accost me. I couldn't go to the store to buy bread and milk because people would hurl insults at me. So it was that level of violence, and the level of violence started from the time I got arrested until the time I actually fled Zimbabwe. In 2018, I was home from among my many travels. I think I met Amasai in 2018 in New York. So just before I came back to New York, I was home, and they broke into my home for Secret Service police people. Broke into my home. They beat me up, something terrible, and they threatened to kill me, and it was crazy. And that's when I came to New York for advocacy week. I didn't go back home because then when I was here, they were again looking for me. So that's the level of violence that I endured at the hands of like the highest level in a country of political violence. Um, so violence comes in many, many forms, and I think if we have to interrogate why we experience this violence, is for many reasons, um, and I think we are seen, and again, I'll talk on a bigger scale. I think we are seen as being a disruptor of the equilibrium of society. So we are making them question themselves, and I think that fear is what leads into that violence.
Mm.
That Yeah, it really is. It's scary. It's scary, and if I can speak of sexual violence, that I also experienced as a trans woman, and then living in a country where you cannot go and report it to the police because what you're doing is seen to be illegal, even though it's not illegal, strictly speaking. But you have to just like be quiet and you deal with it yourself, and you can't even speak to your family because your family don't understand you. You know, so it's so many levels. It's so many levels of intersecting violence. It's not only the physical violence that you have, but it's also the emotional turmoil. You speak of trauma. It's the trauma that you feel that you have to deal with on your own because you are living in a system that cannot cope with you or does not know how to cope with you. So it really is. It really has been something else.
And I think is your story really, it really gives light to other trans who have similar story, like Rumba. And how do you how do you heal? Like, what are coping mechanisms to combating, violence and trauma that have become very intersectional? And I think of those who perform violence, who perform intersecting forms of violence on other human beings, who probably, I think to me, I'm thinking, who are victims and who later become, who
The
get to
perpetration.
victimize
Yeah.
other people because of their own reflection. And, this is something that should be a continuous conversation.
Yeah.
And
But I think just to pick up from what you're saying, Amasa, I mean, when you so I was in my situation, and I can only speak from my informed position. So I lived in a country where um, we don't really have access to therapists. Number one. Number two, if you do have access to a therapist, it's really expensive, and you're living in a country where you don't earn much money. Number three, um, the therapists and the doctors in your country do not know how to deal with you because you just seem to be like a freak of nature. So they really are not equipped to be able to treat you. Um, and then you don't have the support of the state mechanisms. You don't have support of the police. You don't have support of the state doctors because again, you are doing something that seemed to be not legal. Um, so what I did was I so that the first year after my ordeal was terrible. My business closed down, it came crashing down. Like I had no money. I turned to alcohol, and I didn't really drink, but I was drinking heavily. But then something within me, um, I told myself, no, I cannot allow this to happen. And then I found my own way of self-care, and the only way that I could do it because I had no therapy, so I started like reading a lot and watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I discovered meditation. And that's really, really what put me on the right track because then I I I realized that this physical body that that seems to be the cause of all my issues is really not me. The me is something deeper. It's something more spiritual. And I grew that and I learned how to black out or ignore all the um, all the negativity and concentrate on the positivity. And I see where I am today, you know. So it really is if I'd allowed the situation to consume me, then I would have been in a completely different place to what I am today.
Crystal is back. She joined us. Welcome back, Crystal. Crystal, we've been talking about, experiences, personal experiences in trauma and violence.
Mm.
It'd be good to hear from you your personal journey and as a young Fafafine, as a young trans woman, growing up in community and being part of a bigger holistic community. What has been your experience in terms of your personal, experience on trauma and violence?
Crystal, are you with us?
Mayday, mayday.
Okay, might be some experiencing some additional technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Darn techies.
And I guess Ricky has already started, about healing and coping mechanisms. Bonti, what are some of the healing mechanisms that you have encountered as a young person, knowing that what you talked about, your experiences in school, what are you doing to overcome those trauma and those experiences?
Um, I feel like at a young age where I'm at right now, I'm 17. I'm still trying to, figure my life out and what I want to do after I graduate. And so, like, carrying that along with, my experiences at school, I think a lot of the time I had to, a lot of thing. One of the things I had to do was a lot of like realizing about myself and accepting the fact that you have to continue to keep on moving on. And I think self care for me is, getting, for me personally, like, is just getting what I need to done, get what I need to get done. And, like, being so young with adult responsibilities is rough
Yeah.
and, paying bills. So, I like to, make sure I take it easy and, make sure I can do what I can handle. And that's about it. Coming from young, I still got a lot to learn. And I can't really say much, but, that's just how I cope and
Thank you. And I think as much as you're learning, we're learning,
Mhm.
and we get to learn together. And Rumba, really, what's your coping mechanisms with all those experiences? And really, how do you wake up every day before a cup of coffee? What is it for you?
Well, at first it was very unhealthy coping mechanisms, as Ricky was mentioning too. Like the drinking and the like. But most of all, it was like suppressing. Like, let me just shove it as far down as I can to where nobody can see it, and then like put a bunch of dirt on top of it so I can't see it, which wasn't healthy. But it helped at the time. I would go to the lake a lot, and I would do stone balancing, where you find different rocks or stones, and you like try to balance them on each other, so you can make like sculptures of it. And so I would do that, and I would spend like 3 hours at the lake like building it, and then after it was done I would kick it, and just like as sort of a way to release, right? And that really helped me at the time. And then just diving into work, I was just like, let me just work, 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 work. um I started in transitive, and then just like investing in like growing it. But more recently, going to therapy has been incredibly helpful in like figuring out just how deep I buried everything and how much stuff is there, right? That like I still need to heal from. And I have the privilege and the good fortune of finding a trans therapist. So it's a different level. I feel like I had such a hard time finding somebody that I could really process with, and having a trans person who's a therapist like help you through the healing just makes a huge difference. Um, but yeah, I think every morning is just like seeing my cats, seeing my partner, getting to spend time with her, getting to spend time with the cats, um, and building community with the folks at Intransitive. We try to be funny and share food together and like do all these things that are like traditional in like nonprofit settings, right? Along with the work as a way to yeah, to just not be or not keep it all in.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think like Bonti had mentioned in her bio, like she takes self care very seriously, and a lot of times self care looks differently for each and every one of us. But I really appreciate each and every one of you for sharing, you know, like the steps that you've taken to heal from these traumatic experiences on a personal level. And I also want to make room for like what actionable items can we take towards healing through the social justice movements that we're all a part of. I know, Roomba, you had mentioned that, your experiences as an undocumented person having to navigate some of the systems. Even now, I'm sure those effects of trauma still linger on through your line of work with Intransitive. Is there anything that's going on as far as like political systems and change that you're working towards overcoming, so that more undocumented folks can have protections, so that they don't experience the same experiences that you've had to go through? Can you speak a little bit more about or shed some light on that?
So not like legislative work. We are fairly new in a small group of folks and intransitive. But hopefully in the future, we'll be able to do that. The other part is just like trying to provide the support for trans migrants who are coming here to Arkansas. So we've had a couple of trans migrants coming out of detention centers. They end up here in Arkansas, and there's very little support at all, right? Like just as it is for like cis folks too. And so then once you add the trans part of it, it's just like even more, right? So it's been like showing up fully, right? Like with the translations, the interpretations, the like finding attorneys, speaking with their immigration officers, finding them the basic necessities, right? Like around clothes and food and employment. Listening is a big part of it. Folks need folks to listen to them, right? Like, and to process similarly in the same way that we're doing here. Um, so yeah, that's been the main piece with Intransitive. It's been providing as much support as we can with what we have available.
Thank you for doing that. We really appreciate you being proactive in that way while we try to do our best to show up for one another.
And I also wanted to say, Bonti, you know, one of the one of the things about what my co-facilitator shared about how do we address forms of violence within social justice movement. I think Bonti, as your role as as the president of the MANA Youth Council within Utopia, Washington, I think that's a big role. That's a role where you start to play around with how do you engage people, how do you engage folks who have already been doing this work. And I know you continue to hear such an amazing work. Both Roomba and Ricky have talked about, as your role as a young person who is the president of a youth council, how do you think we can address this issue in terms of, as we build this movement?
I feel like a lot of the time, like we don't in like my school, like we don't talk about things that actually need to be talked about. I think a lot of people try to avoid the conversation with like coming from a trans perspective. I found myself in like my principal's advisory. I found people having conversations that about like how to make the school better, but it wasn't fulfilling my needs as a trans girl in the school, and it wasn't fulfilling also me as a colored person. So I think that's one of the things I was like scared of doing it, but I as we started to have a lot of conversations about from an LGBTQ perspective. My school is very close minded, and I've worked with many like adult grown people that wasn't very like wasn't very understanding about what I wanted to propose and different things that proposed for to make our school a safer place for LGBTQ students. And like I've had a lot of great conversations. I did meet the I forgot. He's like the chief of district for Enumclaw, and he's a black male, and that was something that was shocking to me. Is like you control this whole district, and you're colored in a predominantly white district, and um,
Mm.
I think also like I don't know. I lost train of thought, but that's
Yeah.
pretty much.
And I
Thank
think that's
you.
a
Mm.
thank you. I think that's a really great place to start. It's really identifying who exactly you can ally with to help bring a lot of the work that you're doing through the MANA program to fruition, right? And I also want to share, sorry, I just want to share really quickly that Crystal had shared some insight too by saying that I feel as a young trans person, I don't think I've been through trauma and violence compared to police brutality, or physical harm. For me, people at school just say things and make funny looks, but at the end of the day, I want to let them affect me because I won't let them affect me, excuse me, because they're insecure about themselves and try to push that onto others. Thank you, Crystal, for sharing some of those experiences. Is there anything that you'd like to add on?
She's finally joined. Did you put on lip gloss, Crystal?
No, I think my audio is working now. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear it to
Okay,
you.
finally. Okay,
So we're talking about
so
um, addressing like using your role, knowing that now that you have a role within Utopia Washington, and how do we use how are you going to use that role to address this very pertaining issue throughout?
for oh, sorry for cutting off, but for this role, like this, it really gave me like the opportunity to like speak on things in multiple different ways too, like through my school, because like literally I'm planning like trans awareness week. I have events planned, and that is like only going through me. So being part of like leadership and being part of the council, it all like really connects, so I can still be doing this work at school, in school, promoting like the open mic night, and the Trans Day of Remembrance on the 20th, like all just promoting trans awareness. And for me, that's how I would use my platform to like push that out. And then also like I think my platform, I think I would just push out things that I experienced personally. I like to talk about topics that I didn't experience, but it's just I don't think I have a say in how to um go about changing those type of policies.
Yeah, I think Ricky, you were talking about like structural mechanisms that work. How do we then, knowing that there are platforms available to address intersecting forms of intergenerational trauma and violence, and how do we do that within the social justice movement? Knowing that also sometimes we don't talk about the internalizing violence and trauma even within the social justice movement. So how do we do that? You know, at a very loving place, from a very loving place that we're still able to address violence and trauma.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to listen to everybody and hear how people are coping. Crystal and Bonti being the youngest, um, in our group now are talking of Crystal ignores the people, and Bonti has her own system of coping with with issues that she comes against. So I think it speaks to a community of purpose. So and both of them can be taken and can be seen as examples of community of purpose, even at a lower level. And by saying a community of purpose, I mean you need to find some form of support mechanism, support system from those around you, like-minded people that are supportive of you, that you can speak to. They may not necessarily be trained psychosocial service providers, but things like a focus group discussion, and that's where it starts. So let's get a focus group discussion. Let's speak about what's going on in our lives, right? And then let's try and find solutions. And you'll find when you look, even when you look at a bigger scale, how are movements built? How is a movement built? So a movement is built really by a movement is a collective of people that are all working towards the same purpose, right? And that movement started somewhere along the line as some sort of support system. So if we are looking at how do we address bullying at school, for example, for Bonti and for Crystal, um, I would suggest, okay, fine, let's find a group of people that may or may not be trans, but as long as they are people that are the like-minded people working towards the same cause, you'll find that will help, and that will answer your question, Amasai, of how do we structurally address these issues in a loving way that's not too confrontational. And that's the simple answer without me going to a whole big textbook thesis as to how to address the issue. But that's a very basic example of how we address the situation.
I think that's really sound advice as well, because like when I think about like the work that we're doing here with Utopia, specifically around our SWAY program, where we're working to decriminalize sex work in Washington State, oftentimes we are experiencing alarming rates of trauma and violence through upon the queer and trans community that might be involved in sex work. And so whether they're experiencing harm by either the buyers of sex, they're also experiencing harm through the political systems such as law enforcement, when sex workers are busted, right? And then that further creates trauma to create a level of distrust from sex workers to be able to speak on the harm and the violence that they may be faced with. And so, yeah, first and foremost, I think to align yourself with proper allies who have an understanding to decriminalize sex work through by sharing a little bit about our work here really helps to change the perspective of others to understand that to further assist us in legitimizing sex work as real work and recognizing it as such. But also, there has to be more conversations with not just people around, like in your own personal surroundings. You have to make those connections with folks who have the power to impact those changes. And so I think having an opportunity to invite either your counselor or your parents, or even like your local lawmakers to really hear your concerns, so that way during election season, when these issues come up, they have you in mind, to be able to bring about, impactful resolutions or solutions that could ensure safety for the people that we're all working to provide safety and support for. So thank you for sharing that too, and I hope that also helps, you, Bonti and Crystal, and also you too, Roomba, as you try to grow your work in your respective communities. Anything you'd like to add on?
I think it's really like what the work that everyone does is we're all interconnected. And the work around trans rights and human rights, and it's really it's all a collective work. And Ricky, you've really said it well, that there's always a need to structure things in a way that will really work, and structuring things where we're able to also kind of unpack um, unpack power dynamics that exists within. How do we then start, like, how do we then continue to build a movement that is really about, I could say, like, it's really about putting young people at the forefront of how we co-organize and how we co-facilitate movements and building organizations or having support systems. And one of the amazing work that we continue to do here in Ethiopia, not that I'm bragging, but we're deliberate about fostering young people to be leaders, to lead their own work, to to organize their work, so that we're also building them to be better leaders, to continue this work that we all do. And I think one of the amazing things that's really worked also as well is at a queer and trans retreat, where we saw other young people talk about their personal experiences growing up as a young Fafafine, young trans women, or a young Vakasala or Pacific Island, individuals here in diaspora who are navigating this big country and having to also transition and see what really works for people. And I think that leads us to our next conversation. And that will really wrap up our conversation here tonight. And I think one of it is that what can we do as a community, to ensure that violence and trauma is cease to exist. And what is that we do for you? What is it for you?
For me, I think just being visible enough is also a platform, but being empowered in your own identity as a trans person or a gender nonconforming individual, taking up space in conversations or even out in society so that more people are susceptible to your identity and can have an understanding that we do exist, and that we are we and that we matter. But also, like through the lens of our social justice movement here, I think working towards, like I mentioned before, decriminalizing sex work in Washington State is having to rebuild that structure, the power structure, to foster or cultivate leadership opportunities for our youth and really putting them at the forefront of our work so that they'll be in a good enough place or position to carry this work forward. So that way it will leave room for us to be able to heal and recover from all of the trauma that we've experienced throughout our personal lives, our professional work. But I think that's a great start. And I'd like to open up or pass this opportunity also to Crystal, if you're also willing to share what steps you're willing to take to make sure that we can overcome the traumatic experiences that we've been facing.
Okay, so for me, the steps to take to like stop the violence and stop the trauma that trans people go through, I think that the steps would honestly be well, personally, for me, is to getting where I am is part of one of the steps, but then also going to the principals, going to the superintendent, going up into the district's face and like showing them and just being there so they know that our people exist, so they know what type of issues that we're facing and how to keep us safe at school and just make sure that they know how to like give us the resources that we need to thrive in the school district.
Thank you, Crystal. Ruma, what does that look like for you?
It's a hard question to answer
Hmm.
in Arkansas. We did pass the worst, and we were the first state to pass the worst anti-trans bill this past year, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders just got elected here, which she didn't even have to campaign, and she just talked about how she was anti-trans, right, and got elected. Um, so minimizing the harm, it's challenging whenever the system here is so strong and so conservative, right, to the point of putting a target on especially trans youth, the backs of trans youth.
Mm.
Um, but it also makes me think of just like the difference between uh, trauma and like having trauma and going through a traumatic event, right? That I was mentioning in the beginning, and it's just um, we go through a lot of traumatic events, but what helps us bounce back is the amount of support that we have. So that community support, right? So that's one way in which we're approaching it a lot. Is just like how are we having this support system, right? How are we um, combating the narrative being put in Arkansas against especially trans youth, so that community can have that support to get through those traumatic experiences. Um, but I also wanted to mention just like the piece that we often don't talk about is just the harm that we experience as trans folks, not from systems too, but from like our own community.
Mm.
There are a lot of cases of domestic violence that are trans on trans, and there isn't really a process, at least not here for us, to be able to like fully like deal with that, right, through a restorative justice lens.
Mm.
But it is something that I hope that folks are able to talk about more. Oftentimes, trans folks don't talk about it because it just helps to reinforce this narrative that trans people are predatory, right? That trans
Mm.
people are evil, and so a lot of folks just like stay quiet to not support that narrative. But I think if we just work on creating more of these systems of like restorative justice, then make it easier for folks to be able to come forward, right? Because they don't have to go to like the system, right? The criminal justice system, and like put um, a formal thing, right? Like they can come to community and like solve it as community and like receive the support and also the transformation of the person who caused the harm.
Mm. Thank you. That's some really good insight to consider as well. Bonti, anything you'd like to add?
Um, I think Crystal said it all from a youth perspective, but writing off of that, I think it's important to remain consistent in our work and helping and really talking about what's not getting talked about
Mm.
in our school districts. And I think from a youth perspective, a lot of the time when youth don't get consistent help, they tend to lose faith in overcoming their trauma. And that's coming from myself. Like when people weren't being consistent and trying to help me, I lost faith in overcoming what I had to overcome, because like I want like consistent love and people to like let me know that they care. And yeah, just remaining consistent is something I can just add.
Mm.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say like Rumba, like Arkansas, we were there a month ago. We were in
Mm.
Arkansas with
That's right.
Rumba for the trans camp, and it was really empowering, just being in a space in a room um, of trans and queer folks, particularly trans women of color and queer folks were there as well, just to share our stories and our struggles and our narrative in a space it's also where it's also allowed healing to
Mm.
happen. It's so liberating. And but Arkansas is a different conversation. It's such a creepy town. As soon as you get on, you get off the airport, it's so quiet. Um, Weird, I would say, but beautiful set of work that Rumba and Intransitive continue to do in Arkansas. I know Mama Ricky, Outright International favorite, and who has done so much work within building building the movement, the LGBTQI movement, building partnerships with UN agencies and building it with governments. What could be like a way to kind of um, how do we utilize, your role and the capacity that Outright International is in to then bring in community that are here already, that are doing this amazing set of work together with you and with amazing work that all of you do in Outright.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to creating synergies between um, at different organizations at at different levels of power. And again, I go back to power, because power really is the ultimate root of all the issues. The one with the power has the one with the power has the upper hand really in a situation. So be it politics, be it violence, be it a matter of poverty and hunger, it's the somebody has power over the other person. So I would say, it's create synergies, speak to reach out to us, and we'll see how best we can, get the issues on the table. We do have a permanent seat at the United Nations core group. So, we're at that level, at the UN level. So we have the UN here. We have access to um, to agencies, of countries, but at country level. But in speaking now at the state level of the US, we also have got influence. I mean, you'd need to, all I can say is let's speak and see how best we can help. If we cannot give you help at like immediately, we can try and link you to other organizations or people that can help you, because certainly this is an issue which affects all of us, myself included. So it's really important. It's close to my heart. That's why I'm on this call this evening.
Thank you. And see, one of the things that beauty about this work is like we continue to ask each other, um, where to from here, where to from now, because I think we often have conversations, and conversations is this are very important because we get to share narratives, share strategies, and share what works best, and also allowing young people to also take up the space to share their narratives and what things look like for them. And the conversation that we should also have is where to from here. What do we all do together, collectively, and also within our roles? And you talked a bit about that, Ricky. But how do we continue to build movements that really embody ecosystems of care? If really it's about um, one thing that I learned within feminism is that it really has to give you that breathing to breathe like a football player to really be assertive in this work. And what does it look like for us post this conversation, or what is it for us also after this Trans Awareness Week? Or do we always have this conversation when it's Trans Awareness Week, or it's also like a continuous conversation? Yeah.
I think so. Sorry, just to jump in. I think so. I'm actually working on a thought on some a 500-word thought leadership piece I must have done by Friday. And I interrogate the question as to why do we only have to have these conversations now? What happened to the other 11 months of the year? What happened to what happened to every so why is it only now, and why is it that people tend to rush to talk about these things, and we've known these things going back years and years and years and decades and decades and decades. um, and why is it only now that people sit up and want to sit and have these conversations? So it's a very important question that you're asking, Amasai. I don't have the answer. I'm also asking the same questions.
Yeah.
But certainly, I would advise that a strategy is put together by whoever and whatever, um, and you would I would suggest that you workshop it and you come up with this come up with this strategy and say that these, because I'm not sure what your SWOT analysis looks like. I'm not sure what your issues are. Um, even though I have a sense of what they are from the conversation, I really cannot tell you what they actually are. So it's up to you to dig deep into your situations, all of you, and say, okay, this is what's going on. So in schools, how do we stop them bullying us young trans people? Do we should speak to the principal? I don't know what the answers are, but then only then, once you have sat back and you've looked at the situation, you can come up with the strategies. And then don't stop there. Let this be an ongoing conversation. Let not this conversation only happen now, that the week of Trans Awareness Week. Let this conversation happen like monthly, weekly. Let's have coffee once, let's have a coffee morning or whatever you want to call it. So then this is an ongoing thing, so that we are kept aware and we're kept abreast of what is going on, so we are able to attend to these issues.
Thank you, Ricky. I think that's really great advice too, considering it's hard to know where to start and what you can do right off the bat. But I think having an environment where you can invite different perspectives, being inclusive of all types um, of communities into a space where we can voice our concerns and really come up with a strategy to overcome those obstacles, whatever they may be, is I think like I said, a really good starting point to kick us off. Roomba, what do you think? What would you say is a good approach towards that?
I think we usually just meet to do work, or to talk about work, or to talk about like how terrible things are, right? And we don't usually meet to just have joy.
Mm,
And so I think like having spaces like that, right? Um, like that night at camp where like everybody was dancing and singing and performing, right? And it was just joy. It was joy. It was it was nothing else. It was like all the issues of the world weren't like coming at us. And I think that's what helps sustain our spirit. Um, and so the more that we can create those spaces now, and when we start bringing younger folks in, we're bringing them into the space too, not just the workspace, right? Then they can grow up in the movement, knowing that like spaces like that are needed and are necessary, and you don't have to sacrifice yourself, you don't have to be a martyr. um, yeah, so I think just like having spaces like that, and like Ricky was saying, like it could be like a virtual like coffee meetup, right, where we're just like um, chatting and sharing whatever is going on in our lives. But the in person piece, like hopefully funders will see this and they will say, let's just give them money to just go and like find joy with each other.
Yeah.
So that would be a good starting point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about also like, um, how do we really like? I'm one person who likes to use this word a lot, solidarity, because I think it's it's really something that should be the foundation of how we co-organize,
Mhm.
or how do we build movement that embodies ecosystem of care. And um, and then with the question on, Mama Ricky, why, to me, my thought, even the question itself, why not, it's an act of revolutionary,
Mhm.
because we're starting to question, like, things that should be uncomfortable, and things that should continue to grow or to work um, within how we build this movement.
Mhm.
And I think in an act of how we have this conversation is also an act of revolution,
Mhm.
because we're creating space for people to hear conversations such as this. And I always want to hear, Crystal and Bonte, as young Fafafines, young trans women who, again, like, discovering your girlhood, womanhood, lip gloss hood,
Lip gloss.
um, what is it for you to really kind of build movements that really embody ecosystem of care? And we did a lot of this at the Cutie Pie retreat.
Yes.
And we shared a lot of beautiful moments that even I still can't get over. I still have thoughts of the retreat, because it really did two things, and more than two things. It brought intergenerational power, and it filled that gap within our queer and trans Pacific Island organizing here in Washington.
Mhm.
But it also built love and care
Mhm.
within our community. And so, what is it for both of you, Bonte?
Sorry. It's actually pretty amazing to me, the work that I do. From where I started off with my community work, I see the growth and we're starting to slowly change, and it feels good working with other people on who want to accomplish the same thing, just as you like, and if not as much more, like. But it's really good to see people not experience what experiencing what I had to experience. I think that's my main thing with what I do is I don't ever want nobody to feel the hurt that I've ever felt with my trauma and the abuse that I've gone through. So it's pretty empowering to see. I was never the person to ever do stuff like this. I was just myself, and that was that. But to become a part of more community work, it's pretty fun and I love it.
Thank you, Bonsi. Crystal, would you close us out? Or anything
Okay.
last things to add?
I just wanted to say, like, going to school and stuff, like my freshman year and my sophomore year, it was definitely really hard being like the only trans at the school. But just knowing my sister is too, and that me and her were in it together, just helped me like fight through it a little bit more, even when I was losing hope. And then like Dinah came along, and Dinah really was there for me when I needed her. And like making systems from making, you guys were asking like what's the answer to like how do we start this work, how do we launch it off, how do we like get it started. And I feel like for us youth, utopia is our starting point. And I feel like you're our answer and we're your answer when it comes to youth problems. Like when we want to go to like districts, we ask you guys, and you guys give us the knowledge that we need to go to those meetings. And how could we get to this level, how do we get to state, how do we get to you know nationals, making our like presence known. So I feel like utopia was such a good community for me. because that really just like really opened my eyes and really just gave me a million more opportunities than I had before I found Utopia.
Thank you for bringing that up too. As we're discussing intergenerational violence and trauma and how it's being passed down, it's also good to really share the wealth and the resources that we've acquired throughout, our work together. And it can't happen. We can't give someone else a starting point by letting them go at it alone. And so I appreciate you calling upon, all of the insight that you've gained with your participation as a youth advocate through Utopia Washington, because that's really how we've come into this work as well. What a heavy conversation to have. I think it's time for us to take a moment to decompress. I really just wanted us to, have an opportunity for us to breathe.
Maybe find a comfortable spot.
Yeah.
I want to find a comfortable.
But yeah, I appreciate we appreciate everyone's input. I know, a lot of this conversation really brought up a lot of heavy topics, and might have prompted us to revisit some really traumatic experiences. So I feel like what better way to just unpack all of that with just a short breathing exercise. So if you would humor me before we part ways this evening, please take a moment to breathe in, hold for 4, 3, 2, 1, breathe out. One more time, in, 4, 3, 2, 1, breathe out. Let it all go. Last time, breathe in, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let it go. Puts to our Talanoa this evening. We appreciate you joining us from where you are tuning in from. And please, if there's anything that that we can do to provide additional support through your work going forward, please feel free to contact us. On our website.
www.utopiawa.org.
Yes.
Yeah, and we have a few updates that we want to talk about. One of it is we want to share about our Trans Awareness Week.
Yes.
That we have throughout the whole week from yesterday. We started with a big outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think before we dive into this, I think this is a great time to bid farewell to our lovely panel members. I'm sure you all could use some much needed rest after this, but please feel free to keep in touch. Let us know what we can do to help support you, if any. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. We wish you all the best, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rumba. Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you,
Monty,
everyone.
Crystal. Love you all.
For having us. Bye.
Bye. Have a good night. Thank you. Wow, what an interesting discussion. But the discussion doesn't stop there. As we are in the midst of Trans Awareness Week, we do have a bunch of events lined up for you this week. Starting tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll be hosting a name change and citizenship clinic here at our Mapumaya office on downtown Kent, as well as our home office here at 841. And then on Wednesday, we'll be hosting a range of community health and wellness clinics. So if you're interested in tapping into resources where you can begin hormone replacement therapy, we also have a mobile dental clinic that will be on site. And also, if you want to get your monkeypox and your flu shots, as well as your COVID vaccinations or boosters, that will all be available this Thursday at our clinic from 2:00 p.m. to 7 p.m. Following that event, we have our Plant a Tree ceremony, which is located at the Duwamish Longhouse between the hours of 12:00 to 3 p.m. And then on Friday evening, we have our screening of our luau production for Lenofo, The Rise to the Throne, which will take place at Trinity Community Church between 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So please feel free to bring your friends, your family, anyone who's willing to really sit down and experience this screening together, where you'll be able to hear from the cast members how the script came about and what the experiences was in organizing and putting on that major production for you all.
But also, it was also about personal experience.
Absolutely.
Right?
So tune in if you want to come join us. Join us at Trinity Community Church. On Saturday, we will have our youth open mic night, which is located here at 841 Central Avenue North, which is our home office. From 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. This is an opportunity for all our Cutie Pie youth and gender nonconforming youth to come together to party, to celebrate by having an open mic night. And then this Sunday, which is our Transgender Day of Remembrance, really taking time to honor the ones that we have lost throughout the year, but also celebrating our resiliency as the trans community. And that one will take place at Auburn Riverside Theater from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
And also, since the U.S. Transgender Survey has been moved to the 5th of December, so at every event throughout the Trans Awareness Week and at the Transgender Day of Remembrance, I'll be tabling at all these side events. So if you haven't filled out the trans survey, come see my beautiful self at a table, or where I'll guide you to use one of our laptops to do the survey. Or you can scan the QR code and use your own personal phone. So we encourage trans folks, queer folks, non-binary and binary folks to take the US trans survey because it's important. Data is important, where it can also allow state and government to utilize resources that can be used for trans organizing, resources given to trans organizations to better serve our trans community. But we all need to do that, and it takes everyone to build this ecosystem of care that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And if I could reiterate too on the importance of the US survey, this is really a call to action for everyone who identifies as trans and gender nonconforming. The reason why we need to do this sooner, if not by the deadline, is because this is one way for us to overcome the trauma and the violence that we've experienced. If you're looking to access gender affirming care, surgical procedures that help you become who you are on the inside, to have that reflect outwardly, fill out the trans survey. If you're looking for safe and equitable housing because of discrimination from your employer, fill out the trans survey. This is really our last chance to really bring about our awareness so that more people on the national level can really understand the broadness, the beauty, and the existence of our communities as trans people. So don't waste time.
Exactly.
Get that survey filled out. You only do it once, and that information will be used to really build our advocacy on a political scale, to really get folks to the table to see why we're here and what we need, and address all of the violence and the trauma that we've been faced with. So,
wow. Whew. But the last thing we forgot is also World AIDS Day.
Absolutely.
December
World AIDS
1st.
Day is going to take place on December 1st. We have an exciting event planned because we are going to put on a condom couture contest, which will be hosted by a member of each of our cohort groups here at Utopia, Washington. All of that will be taking place on World AIDS Day, so please tune in to really take in all of the creativity that our cohort members are going to put on for you.
And we also have Namele
Ikalani, which will be coming up in December, which is a Christmas special hosted by our La Lima program. If you need information for tickets, please come out and support us, as well as the community who is working very hard to create a Christmas show for all of you at home. So
I know this is a mouthful of information. Please do visit our Instagram account, do visit our Twitter page, and also do visit our Facebook page for those of you who love Facebook.
Absolutely.
So you'll see all the latest updates, the latest trend, and also all those funny videos that we've been doing for you to enjoy and laugh with us, not at us, but with us. And without further ado, to close tonight, we want to say thank you very much, Vinaka Vakalevu, Fafitai Telelava, and Mahalo.
And happy Trans Awareness
And
Week.
happy Trans Awareness Week.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in.